So Tyler and Leslie, thanks so much for being with us today, and I will let you kick us off.
All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? So today you get me, Tyler Sweat. I'm the Accessible Media Specialist at the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. And we also have Leslie Heinzler. She's going to be hanging out in the background. And her title is Special Services Librarian. The topic today is screen readers. So my goal is not to melt your brains right away and go down a really technical rabbit hole. I'm going to be talking a lot about just kind of the really basics of screen readers, giving you guys just some data about usage of screen readers, where you can find them, how to access them, and some more resources as far as learning them. And I'll do a demonstration on my computer of a basic use of screen reader and just kind of what it looks like. And then we'll kind of dive into how you guys can use them in the public library setting. So that'll be exciting. Should be pretty fun. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have questions, always, feel free to put them into the chat box. I'll try to stop and answer them as they come in, but Leslie will also be in the chat. So she'll be making sure that you guys can get your questions answered if I go rambling about everything. So, all right. So again, today, just me and Leslie. Denise and Sarah are not in on this one, so you'll get them in future webinars. So yeah, kind of like what I just talked about, we're going to go over screen reader basics, types of screen readers, a demonstration, and then how to utilize screen readers in your library. So quickly, for those of you that have not been to our previous webinars, a little bit about our library. So the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled provides books and other materials in alternative formats to Iowa residents of all ages who are unable to read standard print material. So eligibility is blind persons whose visual acuity is 20 to 200 or less, and the better eye with correcting lenses, or whose widest diameter visual field angular distance no greater than 20 degrees. Visual disability, so that's correction regardless of measurements and all that stuff. And then unable to read and write, use standard print. So that covers a big chunk of people. So unable to read or unable to use standard print material as a result of physical limitations, a person having perceptual or reading disability, sufficient severity to prevent their reading standard print. So basically, if you can't read standard print, you probably qualify for, and those are our sort of spelled out eligibility. So just want to make sure that we get that, just so you guys kind of know a little bit more about us. So now screen readers. So starting off with screen readers, the purpose of them is to, just like it says, allow to have screen items read to them. It's a technology that has come a very long way from even in the last 5 years compared to even in the last, 15 years. It's come even a lot further than it was. And the biggest thing about it is it makes a device accessible. It takes, a computer that is unusable if you're blind and makes it usable. And so that's why it's a really great piece of assistive technology. I think it's one of the most important pieces of assistive technology to come out. And the other nice thing, they're really customizable. So you can change within a lot of those, you can change the voice. So a male voice, a female voice, even the tone that you can go for, the speed at which it talks. When people are just first learning screen readers, they start off pretty slow. So the people that work in our building that have used screen readers for years, when they're using a screen reader, it's so fast, like I can't even keep up with it. Like I have no idea what it's saying, just at the speed that they have it at. So there is a lot of customizing that you can do with a screen reader, which just makes it, really accessible and really good to use. And I was going to say this. I wanted to give kudos on the closed captioning, standing on my accessibility universal design podium for a minute. And, I think that with Zoom and other, companies coming out and putting those as sort of a standard now, where you have closed captioning built in versus having to go find it somewhere else, I think it's just a huge plus to accessibility and universal design. So always a positive. So 2 types of screen readers that we're going to go over today. We have mobile and desktop. So when I'm talking mobile, that's iPad, iPhone, Android phone. So Voiceover is anything on an Apple device. So Voiceover also includes their desktops, but for purpose of this, we're going to talk about it from the mobile. So that's iPhones, iPads, anything along that is going to use Voiceover. Voiceover is already built into any iOS device. It's already there. You just got to turn it on and change any settings that you would think you would need. So that's I would say the best one in for mobile by leaps and bounds. So TalkBack is the Android version. TalkBack just got a big update about a month ago, so it is getting better, but VoiceOver is still superior. So how you use that is you're using gestures rather than keyboards. So to explain that, like on my iPhone, I would use finger swipes to read through what's on the screen. So that's how I would do it, like to read through it. And I'll give you guys an example of that in a little bit. But it uses gestures. How many fingers you have on the screen, for example, means something different. In which direction you swipe means different commands, and all of that goes involved with that. And then as far as desktops, so talking Windows computers, work computers, all of that stuff, you have the two big ones are NVDA. So that's non-visual desktop access is what it stands for, and then JAWS. So those are your two big ones. NVDA is free, which is a big deal because that's the one, and that's the one we're going to focus on a lot later when we're talking about uses in the library, because that's a great starting point. Because JAWS is one that it's like $900 for a year. The NVDA one being open source and free, it has caught up with JAWS as far as what it can do. So I really try to recommend NVDA, especially for people starting out with screen readers, so they don't feel like they have to purchase something. And then ChromeVox is the one that's built into Google Chrome, also any Chromebooks. So, and that one's more focused, with kids at school that are using Chromebooks, schools buying cloud-based laptops, they're going to be using ChromeVox as their screen reader, just because it's already built into those systems. And so with desktop screen readers, you're using a keyboard to navigate. You're using the arrow keys to move around the screen, but you're also using other things. So like L for links. So you would hit that to navigate around the screen to different links. H for headings to go to different headings on the page. So when we talk about using a keyboard to navigate, that's where it's imperative that the website or what they're on is accessible. Just because if it's not accessible and they're trying to navigate around the page by headings or links and other things, if it's not built correctly, then it's going to be inaccessible. And the screen reader is going to be just garbage, and it's going to just frustrate them and kind of keep them from getting the information that they need. So mobile and desktop. So now what we're going to do, I want to kind of jump, and I'm going to show a lot of resources, and we're going to, before we really get to the demo. So let's go here, and we're going to jump over to here. So the first one we want to look at, it's not this one I want to share. Let's go back here, try again. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. All right, so WebAIM is a company that does a lot of different accessibility information. It's a really good site as far as just kind of giving data and just sort of tips and tricks and other things that kind of go along with that. So this is a survey that they do every year. And so this was the last one that's available. I think it's 2019. I don't think they did one for 2020, but this is 1,700 people that they interviewed, pretty wide range of age. And it just gives a lot of data about screen readers. And I think it's just really intriguing to kind of dig into it and look just to kind of see how people are using screen readers and what type of people are using screen readers and everything in between. So we're starting off at disability types. So while you see a large majority are what you would expect with blindness and low vision, there is still people that's cognitive disabilities, deafness or hard hearing, motor, and then other. So it just kind of shows you that universal design for learning, how yes, that screen readers were made for blindness and low vision, but it can help a broader audience than just that. And so that's, I think, something just to always remember, that when we're talking about things like screen readers, is that just because it helps these people doesn't mean it can't help everybody. And so that's just a good thing I wanted to point out. I'm going to skip down to some of the other ones that I really like. So this is primary screen reader. So you see that JAWS is, and when they say primary, I consider this like a work computer is what they mean by this. We'll get down to mobile in a little bit. You see JAWS and NVDA are your top two, and then Voiceover's down here. I think this is just because the prevalent of iMacs and those types of computers are less common just because of the price point. More people are more likely to have an iPhone than they are to have an iMac. So that's kind of where that is. And then all these other ones that kind of fall in down here and underneath. So if we keep going down. So yeah, obviously everyone wants to use the free screen readers as best they can. JAWS is more common, I would say, in schools. That's one that school districts are going to pay for to have access to, because then they can get licenses for multiple computers. But NVDA is definitely one that's coming around. And this one I just wanted to bring up is browsers. So not all browsers are created equal. So when people are using screen readers, they act differently in different browsers. I know that sounds pretty crazy, but depending on what screen reader you're using will affect the browser. So Firefox is the big one. I recommend Firefox or Chrome. Those are the two that I recommend people. Internet Explorer 11, that one's come around and has gotten better. Internet Explorer used to be a lot worse, but they've gotten some recent updates that has made it more accessible with screen readers. So those are your big three. And then Safari works with VoiceOver really well. That's one comment on, anything that's going to be standard from Apple. So that is an interesting one. That just, if you don't, because see, this is down here, if you look, people are still using like Microsoft Edge and some of the old Internet Explorers, a little bit less, but like Microsoft Edge is awful with the screen reader. So I tell people not at all to use that. And if you look at, this is data over time when they first started these surveys back in 2009, you can see Internet Explorer was the big one, and it just has fallen off the wayside, and Firefox has kind of shot up as the number one now. So with Chrome also coming, because Chrome hasn't been around for very many years. So just interesting. So then we're going to keep on scrolling down. Yeah, so now we're into mobile. And obviously, the more that mobile phones are in everybody's life, the more that mobile screen reader usage is going to go up, and it's going to continue to go up. Because you got to think, in January 2009, there was maybe like the first iPhone around then, I want to say. And so the technology wasn't very good. So no one was really using them. And then you have from here to here, like when iPhones really started getting popular and other, smartphones is when you see that initial shoot up. So that's just an interesting thing to look at. Now, this is where if you look at mobile platform usage, this is where you're seeing big chunk of Apple, like 76% Apple. So that's where you're seeing VoiceOver as the big one that's being used. Because this is your iPhone, this is your Android. There's a lot of other ones that people kind of get a hold of, but these are your two big ones, with VoiceOver winning hands down. So yeah, and I always like this site, because I tell people, if you ever need like information to prove to your boss or prove to somebody like that you need screen readers in your building, this is kind of a great one to look at, to kind of give you the data that you need to be like, yes, it's important. Yes, that it helps people use our services, and just, all of that. So that's why I really point back to this as something that I think is really important. One last one is, what would have a bigger impact on accessibility? Better assistive technology or better, more accessible websites? Like you see now, it's accessible websites that make the biggest difference. We're getting to the point as far as assistive technology where it is improving, but the improvements are more on the structure of the devices and not what the devices do. So that's where coming back to like accessible websites is much more important at this time, especially with screen readers. So next we're going to move on. We're going to talk about NVDA. So NVDA, so the website is nvaccess.org, and I'm going to share that in the chat because that's where you're going to get, and I just shared that with just the panelists, take two. So, that's where you're going to have access to download this. And so it is, like I said, it's free. And they have a lot of great resources on here as far as learning about it and just using it. So that's what makes it a really handy one. And that's the one I'm going to demonstrate here in a little bit. I wanted to check. I thought there might be a question. I don't think there's any questions, so I think we're good. But this is made by two guys. I think it's in Australia that kind of came up with this, and has really come a long way as far as making it free. And then for those of you after the webinar that are like, I really want to learn how to use NVDA at like the expert level, or just want to dive in and like really figure out how to use it, there is a resource that I'll share from the American Foundation for the Blind that goes into videos on how to use NVDA and all the hotkeys and everything that goes along with it. For use in the public library setting, I don't think you guys have to have a complete understanding on how to use NVDA or how to use a screen reader, but just kind of knowing where they exist and how to show them off, I think is the important thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop my share here, and we're going to kind of go over VoiceOver. So it's going to be more of you guys just listening on this side, but to get there in settings, if you go to settings, and this is on an iPad, on an iPhone, on everything. So all you got to do is settings, accessibility, and it is the first item in there. And so then once you turn it on, I'm going to turn it off and turn down my speaking rate. Okay.
Settings, accessibility, back button, VoiceOver off.
So this is where it's on now. It was on. So this is where you're going to learn swipes. So it's all about swipes. All right, I'm in the menu.
Velocity, punctuation, container descriptions, table output.
So as I swipe, so
row and column numbers.
So as I swipe, it just is going to move up and down.
Tap to toggle setting.
And I have the speech turned way slow just to make sure you guys can hear. But as I move my finger left and right, it goes up and down the list. So I'm going to go.
Rows 3 to 14 of 14. Void 119.
I'm going to go back here.
119p. Setting. VoiceOver.
So then when I'm on something that I want to select.
Heading. Punctuation.
I'm going to go back up.
VoiceOver. Back button.
So back button, I'm going to double tap on the screen.
VoiceOver.
And it's going to take me to the last screen. So I'm on.
Accessibility. Back button.
Hit it again. And I'm back out to settings. Okay, I'm in the top of the accessibility, click it again, then I'm in settings and I can go up and down. So it's really handy to use from that point because the learning curve to start is really easy. Because you don't need to know all the hotkeys, you don't need to know everything to use it. You can just literally swipe left and right to get around the screen. Another way you can use this, this would be more, so swiping left and right is for someone that is blind. But I'd say low vision, an easier way that you could do it as well as with that's on. If you hold your finger on the screen,
general sounds and notifications.
So it reads what you're on.
Control center.
And then when I let go, double tap,
swipe down from the top,
takes me in there.
To open control center. Control settings. Settings.
So, and the other nice thing about the VoiceOver is with Siri, you can literally turn it on and turn it off with that. So turn off VoiceOver. Okay, so now VoiceOver is off. So that's a basic kind of look into VoiceOver. I'm not going to dive too far in there because if you really want to get tricky, 2 fingers, and if you rotate them, you can change the cursor, which then you could change like speed and tone and everything else in there, and you get into 1,000 different settings. And I'm not going to do that to you guys. So I just want to make sure that you guys kind of have an idea about VoiceOver and kind of what it looks like and how how the best way is to use that. But on any iPad, any iPhone that you're going to have, you can turn it on and it's usable right out of the box. So that's a really nice thing about that one. So now I'm going to demonstrate NVDA. So we're going to go back to here. And we're going to go to our website. So I'm going to fire up NVDA. All right, so you guys should be
Loading
able to go
NVDA.
to screen reader.
Please wait.
I don't know why it's not going. Hang on.
Photo of a blind woman sacking groceries at a grocery store. Graphic link. Link employment services. Visited link graphic photo of hands reading a book using Braille. Visited link library services.
So as I use the up and down arrows, it's just going to move me around. And so I have it set up.
Visited link graphic Iowa Department for the Blind logo.
So I have it set up right now where it is showing me where I'm at. And that's just how I use it for accessibility testing and other things that I do throughout the day. So that's why I have that up. You can always set that up later, but you don't necessarily have to.
Heading level 2 quick links.
So as you
Visited link graphic Iowa Department for the Blind logo. Visited link library services.
So as you pan around, you can do just as reading what's on the screen. So it's pretty simple to go up and down with the arrow keys.
Visited link graphic photo of hands reading a book using Braille.
So you see things like when it goes over the picture, just I'll let
Visited
you
link
listen to
library
it again.
services. Visited link graphic photo of hands reading a book using Braille.
So it's a picture of hands reading a book using Braille. And so that's what's called the alt text. So when we talk about accessibility on websites and other things, it's sort of text that's associated with that picture so that when a screen reader goes over it, it tells you what that picture is of. And so I think that's an important thing
Chat
to
window.
realize.
Meeting
I can
controls
turn
window.
down the speed
Notification overflow.
on this because I have it set up for me. So because I use
NVDA
it
settings.
enough.
General. Normal configuration. Dialog. Braille 3 of 14. Braille 3 of 14.
Here, well,
Speech 2 of 14. Speech property page. Rate.
so here's why
Slider AD Alt plus.
You can change all of these things just like you can in everything else. So you can even change the
Voice.
that kind of all exist on here. So
Apply button pressed Alt plus. Iowa Department for the Blind. Visited link library. Quick links heading level 2.
So there we go. A little slower for you guys. Sorry about that. Yeah. So
Visited link graphic Iowa Department for the Blind logo.
So that's an example of it's our logo, and it's saying that it's our logo, and it's saying that it's a graphic. A lot of times, things like that, when they're not built with that alt text, it just says graphic or it says logo. And so it doesn't really tell you what it is. But so another way, to navigate it, like I said, is using the keys. So if I hit H, that's going to go to the next heading.
Quick links heading level 2.
So that's heading level 2. I'm going to hit it again.
Our services heading level 2. Resources for heading level 2. Primary tasks heading level 2.
So it's an easier way to jump around the screen and use it that way. So then if I
heading level,
click down,
all
it's gonna
staff
start reading
and
the text.
members of the public, with the exception of anyone age 2 and under, are required to.
All right, so then, and there's also other settings that you can do with NVDA where you can have it where wherever I put the mouse cursor, it'll read it. So that's another handy one that people use from time to time where, if they just want to read with you while still using the mouse, it'll read it out loud to them. So that's a pretty handy one as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn NVDA off. But I think it's, with NVDA, I think it's a really good screen reader to start with because it's free, obviously, right? And with VoiceOver, it's built into any Apple device that you're going to buy. So I think that that's important to start there because if we're going to talking about how to use them at the library level, I think it's important to realize. Let's go back out. That you just want to try to start easy for you guys, right? So mobile devices have screen readers on them. And so the way I would handle it, if you have iPads that you guys that kids can use or someone can use, I think it's just making the public aware that these devices are on, that there is screen readers available on these devices, even if they come standard. And it's just more of you guys kind of playing around with them. So with the iPad, just kind of familiarizing yourself on how to use it and where, how they would use it while on there. I will tell you that if the iPad has a certain app that you guys are using with, let's say, kids or even adults, not all of them are accessible. So that's where you're going to run into that on like an iPad, where you're going to have the, the patron open up an app, and it's not going to like it at all. So it's just kind of testing out some of those things. So if you have a low vision or blind patron that's going to come in, is just kind of testing it ahead of time. And all testing basically you have to do is, if you just swipe left and right and see if it's reading correctly and reading what you want it to read, and you can access the app. I'm not saying you have to go super deep as far as testing those, but just kind of understanding that not everything is built accessible. We're trying to get the word out, by things like this about how important it is to build things accessible and how to really get around that. And so I think that that's really important just to understand, is just starting with getting the device out and just kind of utilizing it and playing around with it. And there's a lot of like other resources, YouTube videos that are out in the world of people using it and kind of going over a lot of those more in-depth commands, if that's something you're interested in. So that is out there. Now, as far as public computers, so the ones that people use to search, within the database and other things for titles, just having it on the desktop is, a pretty easy way to handle that. So if you have NVDA on the desktop, it's once again just letting the patrons know that it's available and sort of spreading the word so that, when they do come in, because you're not going to have it on all the time. So it's going to be a situation where they're going to ask you to turn on the screen reader for them. And once the screen reader's on, they should be able to utilize the screen reader on their own. So that's, one of the other things is just kind of having it down there and then sort of having a basic understanding on how to use it, just so you can answer any of the questions that go along with it. But as far as public computers, it's not that hard to get. It's free if you go the NVDA route and you just kind of have it on those computers. The other option you could even do is you could have you can put NVDA on like a jump drive, so that you don't have to have it on all the computers. You could just have it on the jump drive and you plug that into that specific computer and then open it up. That's also an option that works really well. So then, if you didn't have the room on computers, or you just wanted to kind of see who was using it more often, then you could have it on, one or two jump drives behind the front desk, and then someone asks for it and then you give it to them and then they plug it in. And then you start it up that way. So that would be the ways that I would recommend you guys utilize them within your library. Now, again, I think, within searching for titles and books, our website works with a screen reader. And so it's kind of understanding how good your website is built and how accessible you can search within your website. And I think that that's something that, kind of checking on can't hurt, because I think, it's important that all your patrons have the same access to the same information and everything that goes along with that. And so I think that, just making sure that it works and that, all of that kind of, the screen reader can work with it pretty effectively is something that's really important. Does anybody have any questions right now? I'm going to kind of wait a minute and see if anybody has questions. I know I've been going over a lot, but I just want to make sure that I kind of cover any questions that we have about screen. It could be any question about screen readers that you want. So we'll give it a minute here. There's 43 of you. You got to have at least one question about screen readers. So that. I give it another 30 seconds. So I'd say, like, when it comes to accessibility, the biggest thing that I run into as far as issues is like tagging. Hang on, there was a question. All right, you mentioned that all mobile devices have screen readers built in. If it's a smartphone, it does. If it's an Android or an iPhone, and even there's some other ones that aren't Androids, but still, most of them are going to have screen readers built in. What Android and iPhone or an iOS devices are your biggest ones, but I think that all of them are going to have something built in, and they're not all equal. That's why Voiceover is kind of the top. And now, since I was trying to check it out on my phone, Can we walk through that? So yes, on an iPhone, again, you're going to go to settings, and then you're going to go on that front settings page, you go down to accessibility. It's right below general in that area, and the top thing is voiceover. And in there, there's a lot of other settings. There's a zoom feature and some other things that you can play around with. You know, if you have a patron that might be interested in that or might be low vision that would rather want to do that. So that is one thing. So you talk about using voiceover readers for people with disabilities, but they are also very useful for people whose first language is not English. Exactly. So that's when we talk about universal design. NVDA, let me pull up the settings here. I'm going to fire it up again, and I'll share my screen. So let's go here.
NVDA. Please wait.
Preferences, settings. So on a lot of these,
NVDA settings,
the language.
general,
so in NVDA,
normal configuration,
you could change the
type,
all
NVDA
of these languages that it goes
requires restart list.
And so that is a really
Albanian,
amazing part of the amount of
SQ.
languages that exist. I mean, everything's in here almost, at least all of the main ones that you're going to run into. So that is a really nice part about it too, is that you can change the screen reader to read it however you need it to read, which makes it even more awesome. So
Afrikaans
feature for that. And you can, and so, you know, and you can save configurations and other things. So like for you guys, one of the things that I would recommend is you don't want to save configuration when exiting NVDA. You know, if you're using it in a public setting, you know, that's where it's going to be important that you don't save the configuration, because you and the next patron. So let's say I have it on Spanish or I have it on
Afrikaans,
Croatian or something.
South
you know, when
Africa,
it goes back in, you don't want it to start off. You don't want it to start off being in Croatian. So that's why turning those things off of saving configs is just one of those important settings to make sure that you guys.
State Library.
So, all right, I'm going to close NVDA.
Exit NVDA.
Good point about the languages, though. VoiceOver also, you know, since it is a mobile device, I think that you're going to change the whole phone or iPad to that language, and then the screen reader works in that language. So it's not quite as usable for a public setting, just because you're going to have to change the entire device over and then change it back. So that is not quite as good from that standpoint. So we're going to go here. So on our YouTube page, you know, this is our library playlist within our YouTube page. I do have, it's getting students started with screen readers. And so that one kind of dives more into like a little more deep dive of getting them started and where to start if you have someone that's interested. The question we just got, do you need to restart computers to have it work? No, you should be able to download it and fire it right up, and it should pop right up with NVDA. So, you know, it's just a desktop app that sits on my desktop, and double click to open it, and it goes from there. That was a good question. Yeah, but this one kind of dives into a little bit, just screen readers, a little bit what we talked about with just a little bit more information. So if that's something that you're interested in checking out. So if you change the settings on it, so if I go, you just have to click apply at the bottom of the settings and then click OK, and it'll have the settings adjusted. And so that's what it means by that. So to clarify. Awesome. So, and yeah, like I said, NVDA is the one that I recommend. You know, JAWS is the one that is going to cost more money than you guys want to spend on it. We can do some more questions. I kind of covered, I think, everything that I really wanted to make sure you guys understood. So if you got any more questions, even like how it works at the library, you know, how you guys would utilize it at the public library, feel free to ask. We'll kind of go for a few more minutes as far as questions. I do see a hand raised. Chris Peterson, I don't know if you have a question, if you want to type it into the chat, or you're just mistaken hand raised. It got put down, so I'm assuming it was a incorrect hand raise, which is fine. I'm a bigger proponent of screen readers. I think they've come a long way, and I think that they are making a huge difference as far as giving people the access they need. So how do we save the program to the jump drive? So when you install the program, you would have the jump drive plugged in. And then when it says like where you're saving it to, when you're installing the program, you would just do that to the jump drive. So that's a good question. Would we use Raspberry Pis for our OPACs? So do any of these work with that? Is the OPALs, is your OPALs, is that like your book searching program? Or explain to me what you're doing a little bit more with the Raspberry Pi. Catalog search, okay. So you use the Raspberry Pi for the catalog search. Sorry, I'm diving a little deeper on this. So Raspberry Pi is a world that I'm just getting into. I believe it should work if you're using it as a, if you're using it as a terminal, yes, it should work that way. Because what I've been playing around with is I'm using a Raspberry Pi to hook up to a 3D printer to then be used on the desktop with a screen reader for a blind user to then 3D print. And so that's the way I'm using it, and it works that way with a screen reader. So using it as a—
Tyler, maybe you can just take 2 seconds and explain what a Raspberry Pi is.
Yes, that's true. For those of you that don't know what a Raspberry Pi is, it's like a mini computer. And so it's about that big, and you can basically do unlimited customizable things with it. From, like I'm using it, is turning a 3D printer into an access point that I can then use a desktop to have someone use with the screen reader to 3D print, but also you can use it just to create a router space somewhere or just access to something else. So it's a little mini computer, and it gets really nerdy really quick on what you can do with these things. They originally were designed as like billboards where you could have like neon flashing lights. But I've even seen one where someone did this with a Braille display. So on their door, they had the Raspberry Pi hooked up to refreshable Braille. And so if they were in the office, the Braille would say that they were in. So if you went up there, you could read the refreshable Braille on the door, and it would say if they're in the office or if they're going to be out till 3 or something. And so the person would just program that on the computer. It's pretty cool. So yes, I would use NVDA for that, and it should work. But again, that's just making sure you're testing it out and making sure that it works with that. But I don't see an issue where it wouldn't work. It's just making sure that the settings and everything kind of works out with that. So, but that should work. So, no, but I love Raspberry Pis. They're pretty fun. So I just kind of started getting into really diving deep on that topic and kind of trying to use those. Trying to think, is anything else that I really didn't give you guys as far as resources for that. And if you do, later have a screen reader question, always feel free to send me an email or even give me a phone call, just because I'm always willing to talk about it or help walk through any issues that you guys might have as far as needing help with screen readers, or you're having issues set it up in your library and those types of things. Feel free to reach out and I can kind of help walk you through any of the questions that you have about it. Got some good questions. So last chance for any more out there while we're out there in the world, and go from there. Oh, it's plain stuff. All right. Well, some great questions. I wanted to share, kind of finishing up here, what our next webinar is going to be. So when we're looking at next month, we're looking at etiquette, providing customer service to individuals who are blind. So I think that's going to be a really good webinar as well. I think we're going to have some special guests from our department kind of showing up to that to kind of help talk about etiquette and providing customer service and those things. Because I think it's something that's overlooked from time to time. And, I think that it's just I think it's just going to be a good topic to open your mind on kind of how that works when you're dealing with patrons who are blind or low vision. It's not much different than you would think. So or than you would deal with anybody else, but it's just kind of understanding, just a little bit about that. And then as far as we're going through the rest, we're going to talk more about audiobooks, tech and accessibility, universal design for learning, which I kind of talked a little bit about today, but really diving into that and how it affects the public libraries, community outreach, Braille, youth programming, and youth in STEM. So we still have a lot more programs to go here. This has been a really fun experience that I think we've gotten a lot out of. So yeah, I think that's all I got then. Last chance for any questions.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm trying to grab the link from our catalog, from our LMS for the etiquette class, because I do want to make sure people have that, but I keep clicking the wrong button. Here we go. All right, so coming at you in the chat is the link to get registered for the, I can turn my camera back on, for the webinar next month, all about good etiquette for serving blind and low vision customers. And I hope that having a screen reader on your computer is one good piece of etiquette, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just giving everybody access.
That's
and like
good.
I said, I went over a lot of information today in a very short amount of time. So if if you cool down a little bit from overheating from that and you want to send me an email, you got a question, no question is too dumb. So I'll answer them all. And I'm always willing to kind of have a conversation about screen readers. So yeah, so let me know, or anything accessibility. So
thank you, Tyler.
absolutely.
Okay.